Welcome, survivors, burnout community, and those just interested. It's Kelly Bubolz, trainer, author, speaker, and your burnout prevention mentor. Burnout is not taboo. It's our reality in this chaotic, fast-paced world. But we're not going to let it drive the narrative to our stories. We're going to do something about it. So let's dig in. Well, thank you so much, Kristen, for being on the show today. So me and Kristen Jonas have met through the HR circle. We met about at a women's group, and we were just talking about some of the things that are happening on the strategic HR side. But interestingly enough, as we have connected over time, we've also talked about our stories. And she mentioned that she is a divorce coach. And I said, how do you get into that as someone who got a divorce herself? It's not a pretty place to be. It's not a fun season. And when we started talking about it, I realized the link back to workforce energy. Now, as you know, in this show, we talk a lot about what is in our control. We can't fight reality, but we like to. And that's even a bigger energy drainer than the actual energy drain. So what we're getting back to is what is in our control? How can we navigate these certain events that might happen in our life? And while I don't give divorce advice to people, that is a common question in programs when they're having difficulty at home. They'll ask me, Kelly, what do I do? And so that's why I invited Kristen in for some extra support here for our workforce energy community on how do we navigate this season. And really where I want to start is, Kristen, how did you become a divorce coach? I mean, out of all the things you could do, how did you get here?
That's interesting, and people ask me that all the time. They're like, that's a thing? And I always say it sure is. So really how it went is just really my own personal journey and looking at some of the things that people in my work circle had gone through as well. So I had a really peaceful divorce. We divorced amicably. We shared an attorney. I was so proud of myself because it only cost $1,500 and we had all this money saved. Great. So, but as soon as the ink dried, we had started the conflict. And because it was amicable during the process, I didn't have anything in writing. I had nothing legally to fall back on. I had no court-ordered document to fall back on. So we really just had to navigate conflict with two children involved, day by day, week by week. And as it turned out, fast forward, it really was a very high conflict situation for many years. It included going back to court 4 times and, more legal expenses. And, certainly the collateral damage of all this was a really damaged childhood for my kids. So I thought to myself, boy, was I dumb. I walked into that attorney's office with a blank pad of paper and a pen, completely unprepared, just expecting this person who I never met to write my life for me. And I didn't do anything in terms of getting myself to the right place where I knew what I was doing and I knew how to advocate for myself and my kids. So I got a certification and I am now helping people not make the same mistakes I went through and help people navigate through the process and also primarily the co-parenting part.
Yeah. Can we dig into that co-parenting part? Because I agree. I think that co-parenting, everyone pictures as it's best for the kids, but we're disregarding some of the mindset and emotion that goes into this transition. And some people have partners where, it's toxic. Some people have very different lifestyles that they're going to go into, where one household's going to look very different than the next household for these kids. So let's go into that a little bit about the co-parenting emotions, because you went into it actually pretty optimistic.
Very.
Yeah. And then you found out it's not rainbows and sunshine on the other side, and you had to go back. And I can't imagine that, Kristen, going backwards when you already feel like you're going backwards. So talk me through a little bit about that, because you're still showing up for these kids too. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Showing up for these kids. And then I was in a director level role. So I was learning, I just remember days that I was trying to learn a new software HRIS system. And I was like, I'm on 3 hours of sleep and I'm having to sit through software training. Like it did take a toll on me at work as well, because I only had a certain amount of energy to give in a day. So absolutely. And the one thing that I coach people on is similar to what you had alluded to already, Kelly, is really controlling the controllables. All you can do is keep your side of the street clean. All you can do is manage your household the way you think is best for your children. And while you can do your best to co-parent, at the end of the day, they have the right to parent the kids the way they want to parent the kids at their household. So it's really about making sure you understand what are your goals as a parent, and as somebody that's trying to get the other person to see, you can't control that other person. So the very thing that has to start, though, I always tell people, never, ever, ever get a divorce without a parenting plan, because you will at least have an operation manual, some sort of default in writing system that you both can use so that you're not having that ongoing dialogue. So the emotions are high. Parenting plan also talk to people about conversation apps like an Our Family Wizard or Talking Parents. Sometimes we just have to default to getting off that ongoing face-to-face communication, because it's always going south, and go to an app. So, two strategic things, but really handling the conflict and the financial changes and the relationship changes and all those things are also part of the process of finding your new normal and living in the future, present and the future, not living in the past.
Yeah, I love that mindset. I remember because we also went through a mediator, and we had a parenting plan we went through, and there was discussions years ahead. I mean, my kids were little, and they were talking about how we're going to pay for a car for the kids. And like, that is nothing that I don't want to talk about this when my kids are still in diapers, right? But what they're doing is they're saying this is high conflict events that are going to happen financially. Right. We need to decide this now. So I love your perspective of not only what's going on now, but the future, because I think a lot of times we kind of regurgitate what's happened in the past. And if you're doing this event, you're trying to move forward. So I love that. So let's go into, you said something in our discussions before this, that you described divorce as a season. And I love that because it does seem like a big life chapter's ending, that you did something wrong. There's guilt. There's all these emotions around it.
Right.
And share what that mindset means, but also why that's important, because when I reflect back at that time, right, you are so disengaged with reality and presence because there's so much going on, so much change. You're just trying to be there for your kids if you have kids involved. And when I look back, I'm like, man, I could have done some work ahead of time. Let's get into that, about not only what the season means, but that type of mindset.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. When using your phrase, when I look back on that time, I projected people's judgment on myself. Nobody was judging me for being divorced. Nobody was judging my children for being divorced. But I was thinking, oh, I've got this big D over my forehead, that says now I'm different. I'm flawed. There's something wrong with me. I have my kids are from a broken home. No, I'm not flawed. This is a season, and it's going to be tough, but then there's going to be a new normal, and it's going to be a new me and an opportunity to have, live a life that is reflective of what I think is best for me and my children's environment. When we talk about, life sentence, a life sentence to me is living in a home without love. A life sentence to me is living a marriage that is on display for people when you go out in public, or you go to your kids' events, or you go to family events, but behind closed doors, you're completely apart. You're in different family rooms watching TV, you're in different bedrooms, and a life sentence is also showing your kids what a marriage looks like. And it's not mom and dad living completely separate lives, not speaking to each other, or there's a sense of eggshells in the kitchen when we're all in the same room. That to me is a bigger life sentence than being divorced. So it is a mind frame. I also talk to coach people, primarily women, like if you don't have your children 100% of the time, this is an opportunity for you to use that time for good. So in the beginning, I think I stared out the window a lot, just feeling sad, waiting for them to show up, at the end of the weekend. Instead, what I should have been doing in those early days is finding what's important to me. And sometimes it was meal prep and cleaning the house. And so that when my kids came back, I was fully present. And sometimes it was getting together for coffee with a friend and not having to look at my time like, oh, I should be getting back to my kids. Enjoy it. Enjoy it. Make something good out of the fact that you legally and no longer will be having your children 100% of the time. It's just part of the reality. So instead of seeing it as like a life sentence, I don't have my kids all the time. See it as an opportunity to do something that you enjoy, or that can check a few things off the box, so that when your kids are back, you're there with them.
Yes, yes, I love that because I got back into hiking and backpacking.
Yeah.
Because I was sitting, like you said, I was sitting in just grief, guilt.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
it's you don't know what's going on. You got that mama bear syndrome where you're like, I don't, what's happening? Like they're fine, right? In that situation where you are splitting and the kids are being taken care of by the other parent, they're fine. So when I started working on myself and giving myself the opportunity to find out
Yes.
who Kelly is again, getting out with my backpacking people, I
Yep.
did feel guilty even in that for a while, but then I
Yeah.
realized, like you said, when they were with me, I was a really good mom. I was
Yeah.
present. I felt more lighter,
Yeah.
because I wasn't trying to make up for all this lost time. Like you said, it's the new normal. So what does this look like? And so being at my best self helped, ease that in, and it happens over time, right? But I
Yeah.
love that you
For
say that
sure.
is spend that time working on you, and where that future is going. So in this process, I found it interesting that boundaries, right? And there's going to be boundaries, like you said, if face to face isn't working and that conflict's escalating, we need to go to more of a chat platform or something like that, or an app. Boundaries with, say you used to run around to everyone for the holidays or parties, and now you only have the kids a less pure time. Maybe you're running around a little less to all those family and friend things because you want quality time with your kids again. Whatever the boundaries are, it's easy to talk about. It is hard to practice because you have to deliver, someone has to receive and deliver back to you. So, in emotional times where you're kind of at that distrustful level with people, a little bit more on alert, what are some healthy ways to not only set but maintain boundaries, not only with other people, but with yourself, right? From doing those maybe things you're going to regret later in life.
That's so true. And, I think it's been said many times for people when people are talking about boundaries, but it yields repeating. Boundaries are things that you do for yourself. It's not things you put on other people. So
Mm.
when people say, my boundary is you can't talk to me that way and talk to me a bit disrespectfully, the boundary should be, I won't allow this conversation to continue if you're going to speak to me that way, because you can't control the other person. So the boundaries are set really for you, what you allow, and where what you can do to change your circumstances. So one of the things I talk about is you've got to write it down. What are the things that if you feel better after you've hiked or after you've exercised, the boundary is nobody is going to cross into that time that you need for self-care. That's a boundary. The boundary also has to be in your child's best interest. So a lot of times people in divorce situations, they hold hard boundaries to their parenting time, or they hold hard boundaries to something that they won't allow, their ex to be involved in. So if the boundary is, this is my parenting time, and the child's father says, well, we have a family wedding, end of December, I'd like to have the kids for that Saturday night. Holding a boundary like, well, nope, that's my parenting time is not good use. You have to make sure it's in the kid's best interest. I think in writing boundaries, I can't emphasize enough the need for a parenting plan. Those things have to be in place, from diapers to diplomas, as you alluded to, Kelly. We need to make sure that if you're divorcing when your children are grade school, put those boundaries and those kind of that operation manual in place through high school, including, when can we get cell phones, and what are the cell phone rules, and, what are we allowing in terms of prom, and what are we allowing in terms of cars and car insurance, and when they total cars, what's going to happen then, and academic boundaries and boundaries about how many activities are children allowed to be in. So, those in writing boundaries. And then sometimes it's got to be physical boundaries, like physical space and time. So when we're both going to the child's volleyball game, sometimes we need to have physical boundaries. You sit over there, I'll sit over here. and we don't need to sit together. So, I think it's that, but really it is maintaining, it's for you to put on yourself, not I'm going to give everybody the rules about how they will behave around me and how they will treat me. No, it's what you will accept and tolerate.
Yeah, and I love the different facets of that because there's so many different situations that came up that I didn't think I had to put a boundary because in my mind it made sense or I thought it was in the best interest of the child. And it's got to be a work in progress, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's some situations, like you said, we don't need to sit together. And then there's some situations where you don't want the kid looking all over the place during
Right.
a concert, you're going to
Right.
have to sit next to each other. Just don't talk, there's ways to do
Right.
it. And like you said, when you have the child's best interests in place, like those decisions just become a little easier because
Right.
that emotional trigger part kind of decreases because
Yeah.
it's externally in service. Um,
Yeah.
I love the boundary that it's for you because yeah, it sometimes is like why aren't people thinking this way or why would they require that of me? And it's like it's a boundary I need to create but also live by.
I think also it's really important to communicate that this is a boundary. I remember like my mom would be talking to the kids about the divorce and try to mitigate some of their emotions, and I had to say a boundary for me, I would prefer that you don't talk to them about it because they're already getting talked to by their dad, by me. And then also, at times we had the kids in counseling or, a child therapist. We don't need all these touch points about the divorce. So also just communicating, they thought they were doing the right thing, but saying, it's too many people coming at them about it. So a boundary for me would be, I prefer you just keep it light and just have it be about fun and like, that child grandma stuff and not about the heavy stuff about the divorce.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, communicating out. Again, they don't know the thoughts in your head.
Yeah, correct.
So, what's a daily practice or a simple practice? Because there's an overload of things you're doing and navigating this life event. What would you recommend to keep grounded throughout this process so you can stay on the path that you started versus veering off into the events of regret?
Yeah, for sure. So the one thing that I talk about all the time is you have 100% of energy to give in a day. So write the percentage of time you want to give to your work. So you have to work that day. So you need to give 50% your 16 hours of waking time. You need to give 8 hours to work. Okay, so there's that. What percentage of time do you want to give to your ex-husband and the comments made? 30% of your energy? 40%? Because that's what a lot of times people are getting sucked into. They're ruminating over the comments. They're ruminating over the disagreement. They're ruminating over the text message that had a nasty tone. So I always tell people how much, because right now you're on track to give about 30 to 40% of your energy to your ex. Now we've got, let's add it up. So we've got the energy given to the ex. We've got the energy given to the job. What's left for your kids? The rest? What's left for you? Zero. So I talk about percentage of time. Think about how much percentage you're giving to things that you'll not be able to change. The second thing is I write it on your mirror, write it, tattoo it. I don't know. Control the controllables. What is in your control? And so when you think about what are you stewing about, what are you working against, is this in your control? As much as you hate it, it can be ugly, but is it in your control? Can you influence change with this right now? If the answer is no, no. And then know your triggers. Your ex knows your triggers. You're married. They know what gets under your skin. So know your triggers and don't get sucked into it.
Yeah.
Say, I'm being sucked in again. I'm being sucked in again. So, it's really those three things that I use: the percentage, kind of tool mindset, and just really control the controllables. Just always ask yourself, can I control this? And, just really but to your point, it's very much easier said than done. So it takes practice and it had to become habit.
Yeah. And I love that you put the triggers too, because you know your triggers. And
Yeah.
even just giving yourself 15 minutes before you respond. And if it's something you do need to respond, like, oh, we got to pick up or something in an hour,
Yes.
respond with what is the action that's needed right now. But say you're switching dates or there's a financial thing or a medical bill, say, I'll check into that tonight or tomorrow or something. Give yourself a moment to
Right.
become emotionally discharged from that, and you will respond in a lot more proactive or way that recenters you and grounds you. But the moment you read it, you are triggered. You go back to places that you are trying to get out of. And so when you're in that emotional state, in that survivorship state, just understand that your nervous system is in that distrust mode. So it might even be a basic sentence of request, and you are taking it wrong. So backing up when you are triggered before you respond is going to help, because in most cases it's asking for a date change or a financial thing
Yeah.
that you have to work out, and it doesn't mean it's solidified in stone, right? So
Right.
I love that you also put the percentages, because in reflection, you don't have a lot of energy during this transition. So
Yep.
seeing really where your energy is being drained was interesting. And I did a similar practice to that when I started decreasing where we were traveling with the kids, because I noticed when I did have a day where we could just have fun or catch our breath, we were traveling out again to family or friends or birthday parties. And so we just had to start managing it, because between two households and all those
Yeah.
parties, it was exhausting on the kids too. So we had to just start managing their energy, and that became so less defensive of like, well, I need to go here and they need to go there. And it became like,
Yeah.
what do they need right now? They had a long
Yeah.
week at school. Let's do one party a weekend or something like that. And
Right.
I love that perspective that you said, because it just shifts you out of like me versus you, us versus them. This person
Yeah.
told me this, into like, what do the kids need? And it just becomes really clear of what to do next.
Totally. And there's a document I have that's called 25 Dumb Things Divorcing People Do. And one of the top things I did all the time is I would engage in conversation about the kids, not necessarily time sensitive. It didn't necessarily need to have an answer up until the time I went to bed. So that was the last thing I had in my brain when I went to sleep. And so what happened at 2 a.m.? I got up, thought about it again, and started getting all worked up again. Fall back asleep finally an hour later. To only hear, get up again at 4 a.m. And now I'm still charged because I read it right before. So I always say, from a boundary standpoint and just a daily practice, pick a time that you cut that off and you're no longer available for dialogue after dinner. Something, you can't have that be the last thing that you deal with right before bed, because energy is needed. You're depleted anyway. And if you're putting all sorts of poison in your brain right before bed, when you need to get your solid 7 or 8 hours, you're really setting yourself backwards.
Yeah. So give me a abstract view a little bit about what it would be like to work with you, because I also get that question is like, Kelly, I just don't know what to do. And that's when
Yeah.
people are burnt out or in leadership loss positions, going through life events. So in general, when someone would approach you and say, Kristen, how can you help me? Paint me a picture of that.
That's a great question. So there's two ways I help people: one-on-one coaching, and it's just typically like a Zoom. If I'm available locally, I will meet in person, but I can work with people all over the United States because my certification, works in all 52 states. So it's one-on-one coaching, kind of working through. But it's also I have digital guides that help get, like, if we're just starting divorce, it's that. If you're after your divorce and now you just need a glow up and you need to start feeling better about yourself and your situation, I have a guide on that. Templates. How are we going to figure out variable expenses? We can identify child support and maintenance, if that's part of the divorce, and it typically is. But how are we going to settle things that are outside of child support, which is enormous amount. I read a statistic that it costs over $300,000 to raise a child from, beginning to end. If you cut them off at 18,
It sounds about right. That sounds so, I mean, you
it's
just
a
look at
lot.
shoes, and
Right.
clothes and
How are we going to figure this out? Like, are we going to let them go on the class trip? Are we doing travel sports? Who's paying for all that? So I have a template called variable expenses, and then I have a parenting plan template that is 35 pages long. It doesn't apply to everybody. There's a lot of sections that people just scratch out. They write NA. But it's having a parenting plan template that you can start talking with your ex about. Hopefully you're on good enough terms where you can, chat out how you think that the parenting should be. And then you work with your attorney to make it part of your divorce decree. So it's using the guides, the templates, and the one-on-one coaching. I have, something called laser coaching where, for example, I had somebody that they're divorced and they were going to go to their first kind of big event together. It was a football banquet. How do I do this? Do we sit together? Am I supposed to sit with them? And she's got her boyfriend also. Are three of us sitting together? How do we do this? Should I just bring somebody? So it's kind of working through also those really awful situations where you can't overtap your friends and your family with it because if they haven't been through it, it's really tough for them to know what's right or wrong or how to handle it or how to kind of minimize that icky feeling. So I work with people on I call it laser coaching, just one-off situations.
Yeah. And I love just the unbiased perspective and coaching you bring, because I think in that situation, especially, everyone has an opinion, and that's exactly what it is. It's an opinion, and it's in their favor, not yours. And it's safe for them. So when you engage in social media or people at work or your friends, they're going to hype it up a little bit, dramatize it, catastrophize it in a way that they see the situation. And Kristen brings a very unbiased third-party view. So again, you stay on the path of not only presence, but what does the future look like, and navigating that in a way that feels aligned with your energy. So as we talk about workforce energy management, these are the parts we're talking about. Like Kristen said, the things in our control, the decisions that we're making, the boundaries that we are setting. And these little micro moments begin to add up on getting you to a place that you love waking up in the day, regardless of the circumstances, and you stop fighting the reality. You just respond to it in a much more energetic manner.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being on the show, Kristen. I really appreciate it. Kristen's information is in the show notes. Go check her out. Say hi, or I love this episode. I know you're not lazy. Most people in burnout are high performers, those serving others before themselves. Don't discount this step today, the action in which you focus on your self-growth. Piecing together the puzzle is half the journey. Rediscovering yourself, energy, and establishing new habits is the other. Do not underestimate the untapped inner strength inside you. Explore more resources on my website to move from zombie mode back to liveliness. See you soon.